Okay, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Real Talk number 3, mental health, substance abuse, and our courts. I am Hilary Bendick from Grassroots Justice of South Hills. I have Tessa Watkins from Mount Lebanon Organization for Racial Equity. And we have with us today, Nicola Henry-Taylor, candidate for Court of Common Pleas of Allegheny County, Hilary Wheatley Taylor, candidate for Magistrates Office in Dormont and Mt. Lebanon, and Tim Grealish from Tim Grealish Interventions. And I am now going to let our panelists introduce themselves before we get started today. So Nicola, you are at my top left, so why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much for all of you and your organizations for inviting us to speak on this important topic. I am a former assistant district attorney in Allegheny County. And when I did that role, I worked with Judge Wida in Bethel Park doing a diversionary drug program. I also then, when I came back to the courthouse, ran mental health court. In my private practice now in representing parents and children, almost all of my clients deal with some sort of behavioral health issue or a co-occurring disorder. So I think this is a very timely and important subject, and I look forward to speaking with you.
All right, Tim, I have you in my little box right below Nicola. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Tim Grealish. I'm a CIP and an NCIP, Certified Intervention Professional, nationally certified. Been in the drug and alcohol business now for a little over 32 years. As a matter of fact, on Sunday, I celebrated 34 years clean and sober myself. People say, how'd you start in this business? And I said, well, I started in detox. And they go, what, as a counselor? I said, no, that's a little practical experience on top of all the work that I've done as a primary therapist in treatment centers. My main job is an interventionist, which, if you're not sure what that is, I plan dysfunctional surprise parties. When families don't have the wherewithal to be able to get one of their family members or loved ones in treatment, I come in, organize the team, and we work to have them make the right decision. I too worked in the court system and in many magisterial offices and common pleas, but particularly in Rob Wida's place in Bethel to try and maybe arrange treatment instead of jail, and it worked out pretty well, and I think that's probably why I'm here tonight.
All right. Okay. And Hilary Wheatley Taylor, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am a civil litigator, so my practice is completely outside the realm of our discussion tonight, but I am running for magisterial district judge in the district serving Mount Lebanon and Dormont, and I am thrilled to participate in this conversation and hope to take the information I learn to the bench with me if I'm elected, and have some ideas myself about ways we can provide these diversionary programs without the guilty pleas so often that come along with some of these opportunities in the Court of Common Pleas.
All right. And Tessa, you're new to moderating with me. Why don't you go ahead and just say, a little bit about yourself and, more. A lot of people ask, because I keep using just the acronym M.O.R.E, just give everybody just let everybody know what M.O.R.E is.
Yeah, so my name is Tessa Watkins. I'm generally new to advocacy in general. My experience is lived experience as a neurocognitive disabled adult. And M.O.R.E is, we're here for racial justice. We came together last summer in the wake of George Floyd, and, we want to do good things in helping Mount Lebanon be, a more inclusive, diverse place, more welcoming place, all the good stuff. We just want to make the world better.
Great. All right. So we have obviously two, topics on our, agenda here tonight, mental health and substance abuse. And I guess I'll just kind of go through our panelists and just kind of ask, does it make sense for us to talk about, these two topics together? Do these kind of community members, should they be talked about together in the same, panel?
Do you care who talks first?
No, you can,
Okay.
you can go in the same order.
Okay, so I don't think they're different communities. I believe, and I think that Tim will tell you some statistics that'll bear this out. Many of the people who are in the court system, whether it's family division, criminal division, or guardianships, or they're in a landlord-tenant matter in civil, not only do they present with a serious mental health issue, they may also have a co-occurring polysubstance abuse, where they're using more than one substance to self-medicate. They may come with an intellectual disability. And some people also have some health issues. And so these people come with layered problems. It is very rare that I have had a client that only has a mental health issue. And so I do think it makes absolute sense to talk about them together, because most of the population would have these consumers, these clients, however we refer to them, they would have more than one of these issues occurring.
Well, I'm going to agree. And as you said, a statistic that there's no real outcome-based studies based on this, but it's a feel that I have from being in the court so often. Probably 85% of the people that I'm assessing in court are going to have a dual diagnosis or a co-occurring disorder. I look at primary substance abuse disorder and secondary psychiatric issues, which is really above my pay grade. But normally, when I'm dealing with people in court like this, they already have a diagnosis. They already have a psychiatrist. They already have medication. The problem is they have a tendency not to take it. You take the medication that's prescribed and you start to feel a little better. You say, I don't need that stuff anymore. And boom, you're right back where you were to start with. And normally what I see is these people starting to self-medicate using any number of drugs that are illegal, which is why I come in. So yeah, it's a problem that's not going to go away. And I don't see how you could separate these two. I really don't. So.
Okay.
Right. And isn't it also true that we have, and maybe it's just the police have a tendency to criminalize how these issues manifest in people. And it's not that they're being arrested for actual criminal conduct, but rather like the symptoms of how their mental health or substance abuse exhibits in the world, right? How it manifests.
Well, I will say that I talk to so many parents that have kids or adult children that have been charged with different things, and oh, woe is me, my kid is a criminal, I can't believe this, they committed a crime, they're charged. And I try and tell them after, of course, I get a little more knowledge in a case, that your kid's not a criminal, your kid's a drug addict. Now, because you're a drug addict, you tend to do and create criminal acts. But if you take the drugs or the alcohol out, if you treat the mental health, all of a sudden you don't have any crimes anymore. Right. So when we talk about doing what we do in court and trying to pick some treatment avenue that would satisfy the court, the district attorney, and the judge, what we're trying to do is make sure it's kind of like pulling weeds out by the roots, so that you don't want to go back in front of the judge for the same thing, because that doesn't make them very happy.
So I would like to add to that a little bit. So I think I will probably focus a little bit on the mental health piece of this sometimes too. I think there's been studies that show that people with mental health issues are overrepresented in the jails. We have lost, and a lot of it is because there's some of that where we have some gender and racial issues as to who's getting arrested for what. And so when we have a broken glass syndrome where police are arresting people for simple things, such as maybe marijuana use because they're self-medicating, or maybe it starts as a broken taillight and then they smell the odor of marijuana and it escalates, or maybe they stop someone and the person's having a mental health episode and it turns into, because the police aren't trained and there's no social work with them, it turns into an aggravated assault on a police officer, which is a felony. And so we're seeing a lot of people in the jail with mental health issues. While they're in the jail, they're not getting treatment. And I will tell you that the city officers, sometimes because they're not as in tune with the small communities like Bethel Park or Ross Township or some of the suburbs. They may not know that this person has a mental health issue. So something that could have been diverted is not, because they don't know the population as much. They're not sometimes as invested. So there's a lot of layers as to why we're seeing people with mental health issues and co-occurring disorders with the drug and alcohol end up in the jail and then not leaving as they should be.
What would be the process? So if somebody is arrested, what's their first opportunity to, really have, the court made aware of either that they have a mental health diagnosis or that, they're involved in, substance abuse treatment, and that, this might be something that the court should consider or be made aware that they need medication, something, those types of issues.
So Allegheny County has what's called, they'll do a behavior clinic evaluation, but that's only on someone that's exhibiting serious mental health issues when they hit the jail. And so there is a department called the behavior clinic, and they're usually doing an analysis on whether or not the person's competent to stand trial and those type of things. The magistrates typically, and I don't know if Hilary can speak to any of this, they will get a notification, a piece of paper stating whether or not they were cleared through behavior clinic. That's not always the analysis that we need to do some other work. So if there is a behavior clinic evaluation, that's one way the magistrate can find out. How also if diversion from justice-related services is involved, or if the person already was in treatment and had an intensive case manager, if they're lucky enough to have an advocate in the system to come to a preliminary hearing, that's one way. Or maybe the person's a good self-advocate and they're a good historian and they can tell that, or the officers know them, or the family members know them. People who have supports do better. But there are people who fall through the cracks that the court might not find out. And there's not a coordination of services so that the judge is comfortable saying, well, I know this person's going to have a place to live. I know this person's going to have medication, and I'm comfortable that they're going to come back to court and they're going to be safe.
Okay.
Yeah, I see this happen sometimes when the judges first see this at an arraignment, because it's pretty easy to see that if your charge is retail theft, that you may have a drug and alcohol problem that's causing you to commit a retail theft type of crime. And of course, there are avenues that you can take to deal with retail theft, but is that the real problem? Usually that is not the real problem. It's drug and alcohol. What's happened in the past, particularly with in Mount Lebanon and in Bethel Park and St. Clair, is the judges call me and they ask me, what do you think? Will you come in? Will you do an assessment? So what I'm saying to you is the magistrates, the local magistrates and common police too, have become considerably more sensitive to these issues than they were before. Before it was just cut bait and run, and boom, you just go to jail, and that's all there is to it, unless you can make bail. So, and I will say this too: even the police have become considerably more sensitive to this, and they realize what they have when they make an arrest like this, and they realize that they have somebody who has a substance abuse issue. I'm not saying that doesn't mean that they shouldn't suffer consequences, because part of what we do in drug and alcohol treatment is teach there are consequences. But yeah, finding out as soon as we possibly can gives me the opportunity to maybe refer somebody. And I can tell you that I'll put somebody in treatment usually pretty quick. And sometimes the court date is scheduled and I'll have to call the magisterial office and ask for them to reschedule the hearing. And if they know why, they're usually pretty, they'll do it. As long as they know that something's being done, I'll make sure there's a consent signed to release information from a treatment provider so that the court has actual proof that they are doing exactly what they or me said they were going to do.
So if there is somebody who is not coming in with services, seems like there might be a chance that they could, but in need of services, there might be an opportunity where, or it might happen that they would fall through the cracks right here and not end up with services. Is that possible?
It's possible, and it happens. There are people stuck in that jail because they didn't have the family member that could knew how to get services hooked up, or who knew that anyone can refer to justice-related services for diversionary services. So it does happen that people get lost through the cracks. And I know one thing that Hilary may want to speak to in when she becomes magistrate is having some of these programs that Tim and I talked about that were wonderful at Judge Wida, is that Judge Opiella is doing. That's luck of the draw. Not all citizens of Allegheny County are having the opportunity for those programs. And while we have systems that produce inequities, perhaps we can put in some systems that would have some more equality around people who have these types of diagnoses.
Yeah, I think that's a hole in the countywide system, is that, you know, the availability of kind of pre-plea or pre-court consequences, for lack of a better, more formal term. The availability of those is by luck of zip code where you happen to be when you get arrested, right? And not by county. And so if you know, when Judge Wida's program was running, if you had the luck, which, you know, people arrested wouldn't call it luck, right? But if you happen to be within the jurisdiction of Judge Wida's court when it took place, you had the benefit of this diversionary program. But if you're arrested in the Hill District or in Lawrenceville or in Shadyside, you may not, and it shouldn't be that way. And so I think it takes, you know, some. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I was going to say that in 15102 and 15241, which is Bethel and St. Clair, Arnone will hand you three pages full of resources, and it'll be mental health, it'll be substance abuse, it'll be domestic violence, just one after another after another. And Blaze had that too in Mount Lebanon for a while, and I don't know if he took it with him or not, but at least they are providing information to people to say, here, you can get some help. Now, actually accessing that help, it's a little more difficult. Now we have insurance issues, we have funding issues, and usually people that are in court are going to have some financial issues too. So not everything is free. For instance, if you live in Allegheny County and you need drug and alcohol treatment, let's say you don't have welfare, you don't have insurance, you don't have any money. Allegheny County, through their drug and alcohol unit, the SCA, Single County Authority, has a contract with a couple of different rehabs where they can send you to treatment, no cost. Now, you're only going to get 2 weeks of help, but 2 weeks of help is a lot better than no weeks of help at all. So there are ways to access this, but someone, I forget who said it, but you have to have an advocate that knows this stuff, that can point you in the right direction. And for myself, I'm called, I can't be everywhere all at the same time. There aren't too many people like me that do this. So yeah, are the courts falling short, and could they do better? Absolutely, they could do better, sure.
There's another issue that I just thought about. So some of these clients or consumers have Social Security disability income. Once they go to the jail, and if they get stuck in that jail, if they don't get out, they can lose that Social Security. So that would have been their source of income to help them get housing. And so that there's so many layers of problem. And if they don't have an intensive case manager or a blended case manager or family supports, they may not get back on Social Security. When they're in mental health court and there's a social worker through justice related services, they help those clients if they're in drug court and those other problem solving courts. But again, as we've talked about, there are always clients and consumers that don't fit within those baskets and may actually lose their Social Security disability as a result. And if they don't have a home, if they're not getting their meds, the cycle of problems just continue on.
But Tessa, we were talking about how there might be some socially unaccepted behaviors that get mislabeled as criminal, and Tessa had a good question about that.
Yeah, so how would you go about determining whether they require accommodations, support, treatment, or punishment? Or how would you balance treatment and consequence?
Would you mind, Tessa, when you're saying socially unaccepted behavior, would you give me an example as to what you're referring to?
Yeah. So like STIMs, people that are diagnosed as with Tourette's syndrome, they might have vocal stims. People like me with echolalia, where we just kind of repeat after what you're saying or do like, copying, mimicking, things like that. Behaviors that are just generally not socially acceptable that people will just kind of turn a side eye at.
Interestingly that you gave those examples, because we had people like that in mental health court when I ran the program. They probably had a co-occurring disorder, but we did have that. And one of the things that the first judge I worked with in mental health court was Judge Colville. The nice thing about mental health court is before, and I think Judge Lazara still does this, before you go out and handle the cases for that day, the multidisciplinary team goes in chambers and they talk about the cases. The multidisciplinary team also has review hearings to meetings with each other to talk about the cases. So you get to know the clients really well. And one of the words that we used a lot in mental health court was the word willful. So what you're describing to me is a result of someone's diagnosis. That is not willful behavior. And so trying to separate someone being, and mentally ill people can be willful, and they can, as Tim said, we need to have consequences for willful type of violations of the law. However, we also need to separate when people are doing things because it is a piece of their diagnosis that they either are struggling with or can't control. There's some exceptions to that I will not get into, but there is an analysis that needs to be done. It's not cut and dry, black and white analysis as to you made a mistake, this was bad, and that's the end of it. That's a nice thing about criminal law as it intersects with behavioral health.
Yeah, and I think another, as I think about those kind of socially unacceptable behaviors or non-typical behaviors, right? Like historically, those would be automatically assumed to be signs of disrespect of the process and of the court and of the judge. And I think that we all ought to, in 2021 and beyond, understand that all you have to do is ask a question before making an assumption that turns into some penal consequence for, what is for someone just a normal part of their behavior or part of their Tourette's diagnosis, and not an intentional disrespect of the court. And there, if we can all be a little bit more compassionate and aware, it'll go a long way to making the process feel fairer and kinder to the participants.
I really appreciate this discussion, and it also reminds me that we need to be engaging all of these thought processes at every decision point. Think about that case of that young man, and it breaks my heart, a beautiful young man in another state, African-American, walking home, and he had, he might've been autistic or something along those lines, and that ended in a death. And it didn't need to. So it's not only when you're in court that someone can misinterpret you. I think that we need to have all our decision makers in the justice system think about that, and it can affect people in a custody case. And I do believe that people are trying to be more informed, but we need to be more intentional about making people more informed and having social workers and people who can explain things in all of our spaces. And so I like the idea of having them out on the street so we can avoid a misinterpretation of an autistic person getting killed.
Yeah, for sure.
Just quickly, because we always like in this program to give background. Can you give background on mental health court? Like, what is it? How does somebody end up there? What's the difference in it between just the regular court process? How does somebody, manage to get diverted there?
So some of the nuances might have changed, but I've been the DA and I've been a defense attorney, but I can tell you generally my understanding. So with all of these problem solving courts, it is obviously a discretionary program from the district attorney's office. They have to buy in, and along with the public defender's office, the probation office and the judge, they agree, and there are certain charges that are acceptable. As you can imagine, very serious charges like rape and homicide are not acceptable. They're also looking at the person's criminal history. When I reviewed the cases, if a person had a lot of there were fugitives, or they had a history of a lot of very serious charges, you look at the totality of the circumstances, and to make sure that it's an appropriate case. You want someone that's going to be amenable to the services and to do well with the proper care. Now, here's how you get into mental health court. Anyone can refer a case. It could be the social worker, it could be a magistrate. There's a form, and they send that to justice-related services, and the multidisciplinary team reviews the cases. The cases travel the same route as any case until they're accepted. Upon acceptance, they are then transferred. And I was excited because I was a part of the team that created this system where you got a court order to transfer it from the original assigned judge to the mental health court judge, so that none of these cases are getting lost in the system. Then once it's now in front of Judge Lazera, she's going to hear the disposition of the case, whether it be a plea or negotiated plea or a non-jury trial. They do not allow jury trials in the way Allegheny County's court is set up. Now, the piece that I think we really can improve upon is in Allegheny County, there typically needs to be a conviction. Other counties, I used to visit, and we used to do presentations to judges from around. We used to visit other mental health courts. There does not have to be a conviction, because then we are further stigmatizing these people by requiring a conviction on every case. The piece that I think is a huge difference is the piece after the adjudication of guilt, is where instead of just being on probation or being sent to jail, you then have a specialized probation officer, you have your justice-related services manager or person that's involved. You may have your community person involved, and they're communicating on a regular basis, and you come back for reviews. I believe Judge Lazera does the reviews a lot more often than we used to. And there was a carrot and a stick approach. If you're doing well, you may step down in supervision. When you're not doing well, we may need to reel you in. If you're doing poorly and you have exhibited that willful disregard for the rules, you may go to the state penitentiary. So each case was analyzed separately. But the key was the collaboration and the multidisciplinary approach that I think is very helpful. One thing that they added that I really like to mental health court now, though, is they do have a medication agreement that is very clear to the person as to what you're supposed to be doing with your meds. And so I think that was an improvement in the program. But I really wish we would change the requirement of you have to be found guilty or proven guilty in order to be in this program.
And this is all court of common pleas level. So it's
Correct.
After preliminary hearing, after arraignment, and
Correct.
the part of the process where you either, roll your dice with a trial or agree to a guilty plea, correct?
Absolutely. That was a wonderful summary.
If you come into the court system without a mental health diagnosis, but perhaps, it's because you cannot afford insurance or, for a various other reason, and, you're perhaps self-diagnosed. Is there, some sort of process for which, you can get that diagnosis to participate in mental health court?
Tim, do you want to answer, or do you want me to answer this?
I think
You
you
say
said
you.
you, Nicola.
Okay, I'll go forward.
Yeah, that's beyond my scope, that mental health.
Okay, so this happens actually quite a bit, where, as we know, we talked about people self-medicating. We have clients that don't want to admit they have a diagnosis, or they haven't treated in so long. They got off their meds. And another reason sometimes people get off their meds is they gain weight. They don't like how they look. Things like that, that really, if we would say that's not a great reason to not be on your meds or not be in treatment. But the reality is people do move away from treatment. And what you would do is see if they could get another assessment. M.O.R.E is very good about giving assessments, and they would go in. The problem is too, sometimes a lot of it is self-reporting. And so, you know, but there are avenues. If obviously, if you have a family that has money, has resources, you have insurance, that's a lot easier. But for those, many of the clients who do not have those situations, you would just need to be reassessed and have a documented diagnosis. There's a lot of grant funding that goes into these programs, and there's requirements that they have this, at least the serious mental health diagnosis and or the other types of diagnoses.
So to follow up, does that mean that the court doesn't recognize a self-diagnosis?
Not that the court doesn't recognize it. The court relies on the professionals, the mental health professionals, to give recommendations. They will give sometimes a service plan. And so the service plan would include, this is where the person's going to live. They're going to be in a three-quarter house. They're going to have med management through this agency. And so the court relies on the mental health professionals to give these service plans and to help coordinate and deal with a continuum of care. If there is no diagnoses that is documented, then my understanding and my experience has been justice-related services cannot be involved. So they can't then give that report to the court that the court relies on. One other piece I want to add, because this has become a problem for me because I have a lot of immigrant clients. If you are an immigrant and you don't have status, justice-related services can't help you. So and that's a part of probably the grant funding again. So there are disqualifiers. If you're out of county, if you committed a crime in Allegheny County and you don't live in Allegheny County, you don't qualify.
So there are just like so many hurdles to being eligible for this diversionary program. I
would say there's more gaps than hurdles, because I do believe that it captures a lot of people, but it's always frustrating when you know someone could benefit, but it doesn't capture them.
And my understanding, Tim, is the drug court at county level, the diversionary court, also has the conviction component to it too.
Right, and you need to have multiple convictions to be able to get into drug court. Just one crime that involves drug use is not enough. The requirements to get into drug court are kind of a little wishy-washy. It just depends on who's doing the assessment and who you present it to. Sometimes you're going to need 3 charges, sometimes less. I never know. I can't predict what they'll do.
That's a really good point that you made, Tim, about drug court. Under the sentencing guidelines, you have to be what's called, if it's the same rules, a level 3-4 offender. And so there's a matrix and Pennsylvania and other jurisdictions, and that's a serious level. So we're incentivizing being more, having a worse record in order to get into this program, which perhaps maybe that's a gap right there. Maybe we need to have a program for that deals with lower level offenders. And then there's Phoenix Court, but that's more of a rocket docket than it is a problem solving court.
Yeah, the drug court normally is an 18-month program when you're constantly coming back and reporting to the judge, and you have usually a representative, some type of treatment representative. I know I've gone in there, I can't tell you so many times in front of Judge Nahas in particular, who chastised me because my treatment center I was working for did not serve real turkey on Thanksgiving, and said, Mr. Grealish, the next time you come in here, there better be real turkey out there. It was turkey loaf. Sorry, I'm not in charge of the food in the rehab. But yeah, the idea of being a recidivist with crimes, it's not as if I think you're mislabeled as a criminal. Your addiction hasn't been treated. And as long as you continue to use, you're probably going to continue to commit crimes.
Well, I did hear you guys both mention Judge Wida's courtroom. And so if you can, Tim, I think when we had talked in preparing for this, you had said you were there kind of at the invention of, his kind of informal drug court that he had kind of started. If you can kind of tell the panel about that and how that differed from what, the county is doing and, how that was, kind of successful.
Well, by the time you get down to the county, you're not able to do many of the things that we were able to do in magisterial court. I would get a call to come in on criminal day because there were a number of different cases that might require my special area of expertise. And again, this is a judge who really wanted somebody to give them an excuse for him to be lenient. Yeah, you get these 22 and 23-year-old adult kids. I call them kids because they're so young, and they're catching a felony. And the last thing a 22 or 23-year-old is to carry around a felony for the rest of their lives. They're not going to be able to. You can't flip burgers in McDonald's with that. And if it's younger, if it's 18 or 19, you take a look at what they ask on college applications these days. They used to ask, have you been convicted of? And now they're asking, have you been charged with? And this could really jeopardize your ability to get into a college that you want to do. So, so Judge Wida would pull these people out, and he would ask me to sit in the little prisoner room with them. I was always afraid they were not going to let me back out. And I'd sit in there and talk to them. And yeah, I've been doing this for so long, it's pretty easy to tell who's real and who isn't. And the majority of people that I saw actually had some pretty significant drug and alcohol problems, and also some co-occurring issues too. And I was able to make recommendations, and that's when the judge said, okay, we're going to follow the recommendations, and we'll review these. And we didn't wait 90 days. The review happened maybe every month, every 30 days or something, to make sure that whatever was recommended was on the path. This way, we would come back in and actually have the hearing, and the judge would listen to possible negotiating a felony into a misdemeanor. And of course, the DA had to agree with this. The police who made the arrest had to agree with this. Everybody had to be on the same page. And we had a kind of symbiotic thing happening over there. I can't explain it, but it worked. It worked. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned before about, this doesn't happen in the magisterial district in the Hill District or maybe in Lawrenceville. Well, I don't know those guys or those women down there. If they call me, I'll go down there. I will. Mm-hmm. I don't care. If you've got a drug and alcohol problem, I'm going to help you. So, yeah, the thing that Wida did, Ron Arnone, who's there now, continues to do this. It's not on as grand a scale, but anybody that's ever been in that Bethel office he has over there, it's a nightmare. There's people all over the place in that place. It's and with COVID-19, it's a little bit dangerous. Some of the courts, some of the magistrates are, they have you sign in, go back into the car, and they'll call you on your cell phone and bring you in like that, which, is okay too. But yeah, this thing Wida did was, I don't even know how we sat there at a lunch and had grilled cheese sandwiches at Al's Cafe and came up with this. And I will say, those were pretty good grilled cheese sandwiches.
Well, there's something special about Judge Wida. He was a JAG officer in the military. He also was a former prosecutor. So I'm sure from what I've seen of you, he was very impressed with your abilities, but he was a creative thinker in his courtroom. And that police department was very, very engaged with the community. But I think to Hilary's point, we have citizens of Allegheny County that will never benefit from that. And sadly, a lot of the people who will not benefit from that are people of color. Our jail is overrepresented in people of color based on our population. And so we need to have more widespread equality. I know you're willing to go, but this needs to be systematic. It can't be on a wing and a prayer. we really need to be coming together on this.
Yeah, we
Allegheny
can't,
County's
we
Drug
can't
and
wait.
Alcohol Department needs to do this. And what they need to do is they need to assign one of their assessors to every magisterial district, and they'll only go out there on criminal days. So, I could do Monday at White's and Tuesday at Laratunda's, and Thursday I can go to Wheatley Taylor. So this way you can cover it all. I really believe that this is the county's responsibility.
I don't think we can't wait for every magisterial district judge in the county to understand that some compassion and understanding and creative thinking are necessary to empty our jails of people who are solely there because of substance abuse and mental health issues, because the jail is overpopulated as it is, and it's in large part because of a lack of creative thinking and a lack of willingness to change the status quo about these issues.
And as you said that about the jails being filled, and Hilary might not have another question, but we have not talked about the fact that of resources being lost. We used to have Mayview. We are now housing people in jail that may have been in Mayview. Now we have Torrance State Hospital. Counties in Western PA, I've had clients in Butler County that are waiting for a bed at Torrance. Westmoreland is sharing it, Washington is sharing it, all these counties, Beaver, Lawrence, we're sharing one state hospital. And that's keeping people in the jails that should have gone there, had a team of professionals working with them to get them to the point where they can participate and be recommended for bail, and and have a lot, having their cases moved along. And so not only that, the big resources like Mayview, but smaller resources. Money has been diverted. It's a nationwide problem. We don't have as many maybe smaller services that would have been providing case management and those types of things as we used to.
I'm going to just say that, state the very obvious. If you have a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue and you go to jail and you serve your time and you come out, when you come out, you still have a substance abuse issue and a mental health issue. Nobody gets better down there. And I know they do their best. And I know they've got some people on staff because I've helped some of them sometimes. But that population is so large down there that everybody can't get what they need. They can't. And I believe, quite frankly, if the people would have treatment, we wouldn't have that problem down at the jail. They'd be looking for residents. So, more treatment, less jail time.
You just brought up another issue. The fact that people sometimes go into that jail and come out more traumatized than when they went in. Issues like solitary confinement, issues like a restraining chair where they're putting a hood over your head. I'm not saying that there should be no ramifications for misbehavior, but I also think based on what I've learned and going to visit clients in the jail, that we cannot treat all behavior when we're dealing with mental health issues that's not getting meds while they're in the jail, that's not getting therapy while they're in the jail, as just someone violating the rules. And so we need to also look at when they're in the jail, what's happening to them.
You've been down there, know what's happening to them. That's not a fun place. Nothing. That's not fun at all.
Yeah.
In terms of working with the magisterial judges, Tim, one thing, so we've heard we've done these speaker series, and we've heard people talk about how they wanted to be able to kind of convert the diversionary program that the county runs, not having these convictions and the follow-up, with the litigants, and so they didn't have the crimes. And when we were doing the prep, you had said that, the judges you worked with, they were doing the follow-up, and you had, you were doing the follow-up, you were avoiding, harsher charges or no charges, you were providing the treatment. Did you have, or did the judges keep some marker of the success of that program?
There's no outcome-based studies that I'm aware of. I do know that just from being on the street, being who I am and what I do for so long, that anybody that was involved with either Mount Lebanon, St. Clair, Bethel had a pretty high success rate, because these judges held that proverbial sword of Damocles over their head and said, look, you do this and we're going to be good. If you don't do this, here's what your consequences are, and you are going to have to serve some time in jail. So that kind of inspiration is sometimes enough to light a fire under somebody to go and do what they need to do. And amazingly enough, when they do this, they start to feel better. And it's one of those, aha, why didn't I think about this? They realize that they can survive with a substance abuse issue, and recovery is possible. They realize that they have a mental health issue with the right kind of care and the right kind of medication. They don't have to go back in front of this judge. They don't have to suffer the consequences, because they're really taking care of themselves. And again, this is not going to happen in all magisterial courts until there's somebody in that court that does what I do. I can't be everywhere. I can't go everywhere. All I can do is go into Judge Wheatley Taylor's office. That I will do, because there's a very good donut shop very close by.
Well, the other piece to what Tim was talking about is the family members who were enabling the offender or the alleged offender, keeping them accountable too when they come back to court on these review hearings. A lot of times I've had moms and dads literally cry on my shoulder, but they would let the child who was stealing from them, who, for their heroin addiction, come back into the home or not have consequences. So having kind of a holistic approach and making sure the enabling family members were holding this person's feet to the fire, making sure that if they had to go inpatient, they made them go inpatient. Obviously, adults can decide not to, but having this kind of holistic village approach to it, where everyone is having a goal of success in the end and not having serious charges go downtown, and having a life plan, not just a one and done. We're going to plan, we want to see that you will live, that you will not end up in jail, or you will not end up in the graveyard. I believe that's what Judge Wada would have said.
Well, and I think like what these sorts of diversionary courts also do, right, is it pulls a huge number of people out of the jail that are waiting for trial. It pulls a huge number of cases out of the standard track case backlog, and it then speeds up people to get to their trials in it, because there are less. I think that just from a like access to justice standpoint, pulling these small segments of the population out of the standard track is good for the whole system. And if you can sell the powers that be in court administration on, we're not just doing this to benefit the people suffering or living with the substance abuse disorder, the mental health disorder, and the consequences that those bring to their lives, but how it can impact the county court system as a whole, and impact, the jail budget and the court system budget. I think you that's how you bring everybody to the table, that it's not just solely designed to benefit the participants, but that it, will benefit the county court system as a whole, right?
So you hit the nail on the head. There was Rand Corporation did a study when I was the DA doing mental health court, and they found obviously that if we're dealing with treatment, we're stopping recidivism, that the county will save money. So there is a case to be made. That study was done, and it was well done, many pages long. We just need to, as you said, convince the powers that be that this needs to happen systematically at the magistrate level.
Right.
I want to make a comment on family members. I think all family members should be beaten. No, okay, that's a little bit strong. I watch these family members, and if the United States needed to have family members represented on our enabling team for the Olympics, I know plenty of these family members who would bring home the gold. They let their family member walk all over them, spiritually, financially, emotionally, and sometimes even physically. What we teach is this is a family disease. So when I'm dealing with somebody in a courtroom, I'm also dealing with the family, and I have to take the family aside, and I have to have a realistic talk and say, listen to me. If you want to keep this guy sick, just keep doing exactly what you're doing, and he will stay sick, and he will end up going to jail because I know little Johnny would never do anything like that. And I know he's a beautiful guy, and he sang in the choir and all these other things. You know, he's in an orange jumpsuit. Okay, he's shuffling around with leg irons. It's time to wake up. So what I do is I put the families into Nar-Anon and Al-Anon, and I try and hook them up with individual outpatient counselors, with therapists, so that they can learn that their behaviors. I'm not blaming them for their kids' addiction, but we're talking about a disease that is genetically predisposed. So to a certain extent, they better take a look at this, and they better change their behaviors. They want to help their kids. They want to help their family member that's in a magisterial court. Well, you know what? You got to wake up. So I'm sorry to get on that soapbox. That drives me nuts.
We definitely need to talk. Go ahead, Hilary.
No, go ahead, Nicole. I was disagreeing.
No. Well, we're just saying amen. Because we cannot solve this by just the offender or the alleged offender. We definitely need to have everyone buy into this.
Addiction's a family disease.
Yeah.
And there's trauma in a lot of these families. There is trauma and history. And the trauma has been since for many, many years. And so you're right. Those supports need to be whole so that they could be a part of the recovery of the person that is in the system.
We have all these kind of goofy expressions in recovery. And one of them is, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And that's what happens here with families who are going to continue their enabling behaviors. And then they're shocked that the judge says, I'm sorry, you've got to go down to the county. I'll tell you why that happened. It's because you let them do this, you let them do that. I'm not blaming you for the disease of addiction. I'm blaming you for your own behaviors. So.
All right. Well, so we're getting down to kind of the last few minutes. So I always like to follow up with kind of some closing questions. So let's start with first, is there anything you think the courts, and I'll go through all the panelists, that you think the court is doing right when it comes to, handling both mental health and substance abuse? Anything you like the way the court's handling, you think they're, is going good? Let me start.
I'll start. So something we haven't talked about a lot is Family Division has, and you know this, Hilary, the IMPACT program. And that's something they added. It was after mental health court and all of that. And that's really a nice option where we have people in Family Division and we have allegations that someone is using illicit substances or has a mental health issue. That's a nice piece that was added, but I'd love to see Family Division do more along the lines of treatment and infusing that into the cases. Unless we're doing impact or someone has private services, or we're doing a serious custody evaluation, it doesn't come into play as much as it should, because honestly, the reason why I can do family law is because it's a lot of the same population that I met in mental health court. They're in doing domestic violence cases. It's a lot of overlap in these populations. And so while it's nice that we've added those services and those are through justice related services, Tiffany and the other lady, they work for the same place that those people do in diversion and mental health court, but we can also fix those gaps as well.
Personally, what I do like is the fact that I think courts are waking up to some of this stuff. We're not in these archaic dark ages anymore. Courts are realizing, unfortunately for the mental health issues, they're not as tuned in as they are with drug and alcohol, because the drug and alcohol is so incredibly obvious. So I'd like to see them focus a little more on mental health or dual diagnosis, the co-occurring. But I'm really pleased with them taking an honest look at drug and alcohol. And I'm not saying It used to be a judge would sentence you to, you are going to go to inpatient rehab for 30 days. Now I'm sitting out here with no insurance. I've got no financial means. So now I've got to do 30 days in jail just because I don't have insurance. Well, now the judges are to the point where they'll say, okay, I'll take a recommendation from a treatment expert, which means now I can come in and I can arrange funding and do a little shucking and jiving and make sure that I get somebody the help that they need, and not, I don't want to back them into a corner where they're going to have to do 24 days of treatment, and because the judge ordered 30, now I'll go to jail for 6 days. That's crazy. And that's what used to happen. It's not happening anymore. So I'm happy about that.
Worked in this realm. I don't know what the courts are currently doing well, but I know what we're all doing well is having these conversations and talking about ways that we can do better, and acknowledging the gaps in the system and acknowledging who the system is failing. And I think that, you know, this election cycle and these discussions that all of the candidates are having is going to go a long way to filling some of these gaps that we all acknowledge exist.
Tessa, I'd like to ask you, and start with you here, as a neurodivergent person, what would you, I know that we had talked earlier, you know, that sometimes the courts can, you know, make either persons with mental illness or neurodivergence persons feel unheard of, or in fact be unheard in the court process. What would you like to see the courts improve on and to help better that experience?
Well, so there's two things that come to mind. The first is accessibility, communication. Part of my disability includes situational mutism. So when I am under extreme emotional distress, I can't speak. And it's not because I don't want to, I just physically can't. I can't. I lose words all the time. I stutter, and I just go blank and become very, very forgetful. So I think essentially having that accessibility where I can communicate either by sign language or augmented device, iPads, you know, there's picture boards. There's so much out there more than just words. And I think it's really important to allow people to be heard, because when you take these things away, you're taking our voices away. So I think it's really important to have these accessibilities. And that brings me to the second part is, you know, recognizing self-diagnosis in the sense that, you know, we are the experts of our own bodies. We have that lived experience. You know, experts might have been studying these, you know, studying us since, you know, college in the 20s or in their 20s, but we've been living this our whole life. You know, we know what we're capable of. You know, when someone can't speak a certain language, you don't ask them to prove, you know, with a piece of paper, what language do you speak so we can get you a translator. You know, we just, you know, you guys just do it. You guys offer those services for free. So if somebody's like, hey, I'm autistic, you know, I can't, you know, always talk, you know, can I have an assistive device, you know, provide that for free. Let them have their voice so they can speak for themselves.
Okay. So then I will ask the, you know, everybody on the panel the same question. What would you, you know, if you could say the court needs to improve, you know, one thing, you know, to help people with mental illness, neurodivergent persons, substance abuse issues, you know, what would you want to see improved upon or expanded? It could even be expanded. And what would you hope to do if you're elected, candidates?
Do you have an order you want to go in?
No, whoever.
I'll start since I'm unmuted.
Go ahead. Yes,
please. Okay, I'm going to turn off my video because the connection's unstable, but I think maybe talking without the video will be fine. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I think, you know, it is something as simple as being curious and open-minded and asking questions of the litigants and instead of making assumptions about why eye contact isn't being made, or why a litigant may end up in court because they standing that it's not always just disobedience on the part of the participants or lack of respect of the process on the part of the participants. And I think judges at all levels of the court would be you know, well equipped to handle, you know, what you might have ordinarily considered disrespect of the system if they just ask some questions, just ask the questions in a respectful way and understand that not everybody presents neurotypically, or as, you know, we would currently consider normal social conduct. And if we can do that, we can go a long way to making people feel heard and seen in the courtroom.
Well, I'd like to see them do pretty much what they're doing right now, only make it, I'd like to see the services expanded. I'd like to see an assessor in every courtroom. And it would be great if they could be a substance abuse and mental health assessor. And I'd like to see them be able to provide that information to the judge or the magistrate so that they can make a better decision and maybe allow treatment to go from there. In other words, what I'd like to see all the magisterial districts do, and the common pleas is exactly what we did at Wyda's office. That's what I'd like. And I'm not even running for office.
We definitely have to keep you in mind to share your ideas. So I think this conversation has convinced me more that it would be wonderful if there was a roundtable with some of the Court of Common Pleas judges and some of the magistrate judges and some stakeholders, because I think we need people like Tim in the room and also like Tessa in the room that can share. And even if there are different subcommittees, there has to be intentional approaches. It's kind of like what Tim talked about is if we don't do anything differently or there's no change, you're not going to see a change. So let's do some things differently and start thinking progressively and thinking intentionally about what are the problems, what are the positives, and how do we fix things. The other thing is I would love to see, and Judge Clark talked about this, I did an interview with her for the PBI, and she talked about what her platform was. Unfortunately, COVID hit. And so some of the things she was talking about is having more trauma-informed courts, having training on things like diversity, inclusion. And as we are talking about people presenting differently and others not understanding, that's a piece of training that I believe court staff should have, not just the judges. When someone walks into that courthouse and perhaps the building guard is yelling at them, that could be a person that has been traumatized, or that could be a person that has a diagnosis like Tessa explained. So we need people to be very informed about what people bring to their lived experiences as they're interfacing with the courts. Lastly, I would love to see more family services, of mental health services, and understanding of mental health infused into family division. Without family, where our kids start and the families are a basis of our society, if we don't fix it there, we're not going to stop seeing them at Judge Wyda's or at Judge Arnani's. We need to start dealing with these issues at the family level first.
Yep, great. All right, so this is the part where I go through candidates. We are advocacy groups. We go through what you guys have coming up next, where you need help. And I put in your information, which I'm sorry, I'm a little slow on the draw on this one. Although I don't know that it will show up anywhere. So maybe we'll have you say your websites,
Sure.
if that works, because I'm realizing that I don't think because it's on Facebook Live. So Nicola, what do you have coming up?
We have an event coming up next week with the slate of 8. There are 8 progressive candidates that some grassroots organizations have supported. But I would like to tell you what my website is so that you can keep up to date and sign up to be a volunteer, whatever you'd like to do. It's Nicola. It's www.nicola, www.nicola, Nicola, the number 4 judge.com. And keep every weekend there's something to do. And we've been blessed to work with Hilary's campaign, and so she's been busy and keeping us busy as well.
All right, and Hilary, what do you have coming up?
We've got canvassing events coming up both on Saturday and Sunday this coming weekend. Saturday will be door knocking. Sunday we're doing just an exclusive lit drop event, working with Partners for Progress Southwest PA on that lit drop event, I believe. Details for all of those events can be found at my campaign Facebook page, Hilary for Magistrate, and at my website, electhilary, HILARY.com.
All right, and we will try and put those up on their website, but I will encourage everybody to go to both their websites and please donate to these candidates. They need to purchase literature to get out into everybody's houses to get their names out. They need to purchase, I'm guessing Nicola is going to be purchasing commercials in the upcoming future so we can see her advertising, and Hilary needs to get her hand literature. We need to get both these candidates in office so we can make sure that these issues are well represented. We have candidates who are well versed on these issues in our judiciary. And Tim, I don't want to leave you out. Do you have anything you need to plug?
Yeah, I was wondering. I have a lot of stuff coming up, but you know what? Now I'm not going to tell you. Forget it. But I will tell you my I will tell you my website. My website is teginterventions.com. Tango Echo Golf Interventions.com, and it explains about interventions and what I do and how I do it. But really, you can hit my website and get a phone number. I am your one-stop shop for all your drug and alcohol addiction needs. I feel like I'm doing a bad cable commercial.
I know we always do a plug at the end. It's a little cheesy,
It works.
but
It works.
we like it. All right, thank you, everyone. And next week we have Tiffany Sizemore and Hilary Wheatley Taylor on the subject on kids in our courts. So we look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.